In an exclusive interview to India Today magazine, former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh has opened up like never before. He's made some very candid and explosive comments on the Narendra Modi Sarkar, especially on the economy and his Pakistan policy.
Commonly chided for his silence, former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh has spoken out in no-holds-barred interview to India Today. For the first time, Manmohan Singh has made some explosive comments like on the Modi government. The former Prime Minister said, "The people of India have no faith in the present government and civil servants are clueless about who their seniors are." The shrinking of the economy also worries Manmohan Singh, as do the Modi government's flip-flops on Pakistan. When asked about the economy after the BJP government came into power, he said, growth rate has not increased significantly since Congress left power. Manmohan Singh also spoke on Modi's efforts to bridge the diplomatic gap between India and Pakistan, saying that the government has been rather inconsistent with their stand on Pakistan. He said the Modi government took one step forward and two back. According to Manmohan Singh, PM Modi did take suggestions from him on dealing with Pakistan, but would not publicly credit him for that.
Senior political leaders had gone to felicitate Mr. Sharad Pawar, the senior NCP leader, on his 75th birthday, and both the Prime Minister and former Prime Minister Dr. Manmohan Singh were coming out of that venue. Mr. Modi said to Dr. Singh, "We are following your policy in Pakistan," and I think he felt that despite the attacks, despite the Pathankot attacks, despite the tension on the border, the Modi government has not given up the conversation with Pakistan.
The former Prime Minister added that PM Narendra Modi has remained silent on pressing issues like Muzaffarnagar riots and the beef controversy. He strongly believes that the Prime Minister must do much more to heal the country.
Very respectfully, I would say to Mr. Manmohan Singh that when Mr. Manmohan Singh speaks of communication, then I would just say, look who is speaking. We all know of the fact that Mr. Manmohan Singh was a silent Prime Minister. Not just literally silent, but there was policy paralysis as well.
देश में इस बात की खुशी बताना चाहूँगा कि मनमोहन सिंह जी ने मोदी जी का नाम लेकर कुछ बात तो की.
A full frontal attack on Narendra Modi like never before. Manmohan Singh has also rued that he doesn't reach out to the main opposition parties, accusing Modi of not making a sincere effort to reach out to the opposition with regards to GST bill and foreign policy. With Jyoti Malhotra, Bureau Report, India Today.
Dr. Manmohan Singh led this country for 10 years and he now says that there is a crisis of confidence in the Narendra Modi government. Jayant Sinha is Minister of State for Finance. Rahul Kanwal, our managing editor, spoke to him on this and lots more. Let's listen in.
The Union Budget of 2016 is being labelled a make-or-break budget for the investors, for the Aam Aadmi and most importantly for the Modi government. The response to the first two budgets has been rather insipid. The stock markets seem to be in deep decline. To talk about where the promised Achhe Din have really gone, joining us on this pre-budget show is Union Minister of State for Finance, Jayant Sinha. Jayant, welcome. The government was sworn in on the promise of bringing Achhe Din. We're about halfway through, at least financially, into your government. And let's take the stock markets as an example. We're roughly down to where the stock markets were before Prime Minister Modi got sworn in. So essentially, the Modi burst of enthusiasm seems to have completely gone away as we build up to the big budget of 2016.
Now, the economy is doing rather well, Rahul. If you look at it in terms of any of the important macroeconomic parameters, GDP growth, fiscal deficit, inflation, current account deficit, on all these parameters, we have thoroughly turned around the economy. It's a resilient economy. It's the fastest growing large economy in the world right now. Those are the numbers that we should be looking at. Now, of course, the stock market goes through its ups and downs. And right now, the stock market is going through a turbulent phase. And it's largely going through this turbulent phase right now because there is tremendous global volatility, global turbulence right now across the world. Markets are careening and are coming down, and that is happening because of a variety of external factors.
It's not just global instability. If you look at what the fund managers are saying, they're also not happy at the speed at which the Modi government is being able to push towards maximum governance, minimum government, or push towards ushering in Achhe Din by bringing about the kind of big ticket reforms that the markets thought that the government would implement?
Achhe Din are absolutely here. I just gave you the numbers to prove that.
No, but who
Now,
decides that? Let me ask. We've got a whole bunch of students here who've come in from management institutes. Do any of you feel that Achhe Din have actually arrived?
Not really.
Do you feel Achhe Din? Is there anyone who thinks Achhe Din have arrived? Can you put your hand up if anybody thinks Achhe Din have arrived? So you've got just a cross-sampling here. This is not with the intent of embarrassing anyone, but if you've got a cross-sampling here, and most people here, and I'm sure elsewhere as well, would say Achhe Din have not arrived. They may have arrived for Minister of State Jayant Sinha, who's now got a lal batti and therefore is much happier than he was earlier. But
I had a very good life in the private sector.
Oh,
Rahul,
absolutely.
so I'm not
That's
sure
true in
about
your
that.
instance. But I'm saying that most people would ordinarily say that for them Achhe Din haven't come. They're still looking for those Achhe Din.
Well, I mean, definitely if we go by the facts, whether, again, as I said, inflation, GDP growth rate, job creation, FDI, all the numbers are very, very positive. Certainly, if you go back and you look at inflation, Mangai, which pinches everyone, that Mangai was running at 10% a year in the UPA government. That inflation is now running at 5% or lower in our government. We've obviously done the analysis and looked at what has happened to prices in our government versus prices in the previous government. Prices have stayed flat or come down in many cases, for example, in diesel and petrol and gas cylinders. Yes, of course, dal prices have gone up, but apart from that, prices have very much stayed under control.
But a large
Again, if
part
you look
of
at
the reason why prices have actually come down is because you've had very favorable crude oil prices. From about $150 or at least plus $100 now down to almost $24, currently around $30. I want to quote to you what former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh said in an exclusive interview to India Today. He was asked about the state of the economy and how the Narendra Modi government was dealing with it. He says, and I quote now, "The economy is not in as good shape as it should be, despite the fact that the situation today is much more favorable than what it was when the UPA was in power." He says that crude oil prices are down to $30 a barrel. This has significantly helped India's balance of payment. The current account deficit has come down. This has helped the government reduce the fiscal deficit. In the hands of a purposeful government, this could have been an opportunity to step up investment in a big way. But for one reason or the other, the government hasn't been able to get its act in order. All the figures that you mentioned about the fiscal deficit, all the figures that you mentioned about how the government had been able to get the current account deficit under control are all because of the fact that you've had favorable global tailwinds.
I would very much enjoy the opportunity to debate all of this in Parliament, in the Rajya Sabha, if, Manmohan Singh ji's government would, or his party would allow us to be able to debate all of this in Parliament. Let's talk about what's actually happening. You asked about big ticket reforms. We've undertaken many and very important big ticket reforms. If you look at what we're doing in terms of Make in India, ease of doing business, Jan Dhan Yojana, Mudra, the manner in which we've reshaped the fiscal architecture of the Indian state, all of these things are massive big ticket reforms. I'll give you one simple example. During the 10 years of Dr. Manmohan Singh ji's government, not a single bank license was given out. Not a single bank license. In 18 months, we've given out 23 bank licenses. That's big ticket reform, Rahul, and that is absolutely happening right now. If people didn't have faith and confidence in our economy, in a world where FDI is declining, our FDI numbers are up 40%.
But all those FDI numbers are essentially coming in from e-commerce, where you've got, again, a global phenomenon.
Not at all true, Rahul.
A lot of
Not
it.
true. Foxconn is investing in India. SoftBank,
But the big numbers
SoftBank is investing in. No, Foxconn is putting in billions. SoftBank is putting in billions. General Motors and Ford are putting in billions. We've just announced with GE and Alstom 40,000 crores worth of investment in locomotive factories in Bihar. All of this is happening in Make in India, in manufacturing, and not just in e-commerce.
I want to go back to the Manmohan Singh interview I spoke about. He was asked by our correspondent, why has the Modi government not been able to deliver on the front of the economy? And he says, people don't believe in the government. When they go out and call on ministers, the ministers say the right thing. But when they come out, they say to each other that nothing has changed. Today, there's a crisis of confidence in the government. There seems to be a lack of confidence within the business community. How do you respond to this?
I think if you see the rate of investment right now, and if you look at what is happening with respect to either FDI or domestic investment, in those sectors of the economy where there is demand, where it's possible to make profitable investments, you will see very significant growth. I'll point you, Rahul, to what's happening to both indirect taxes as well as to service taxes. And what you will find there is that whether you look at customs or you look at excise taxes, those are growing quite strongly. You look at service taxes, those are growing quite strongly. And but where is the growth coming from? It's coming from financial services. It's coming in telecom. It's coming in airlines. Certainly it's coming in e-commerce. It's coming with restaurants. It's coming in tourism. These are the new sectors of the economy where investment is going in and growth is in fact happening.
This is where India seems to be shining, yet at the same time
showing the strength of economic activity.
True, but at the same time, while there's one part of India which you can argue is shining, rural indebtedness and rural distress is getting much worse. We've had successive droughts and the government clearly hasn't been able to revive spirits or confidence in the rural sector.
You're exactly right, Rahul. Anybody who says that we have benefited greatly from petrol and oil prices coming down is correct. But that is only half of the truth. The other half of the truth is that there are many other negative factors that we have to deal with. One of them, which you've just laid out, is the fact that we've had 2 years of deficient rainfall in the monsoon. This has happened after 30 years. During Dr. Manmohan Singh's government, there weren't 2 failed monsoons in a row. That has happened during our government's time, number one. Number two, you also have to recognize that there has been a tremendous slowdown globally. Exports around the world are down. That is another headwind that we are dealing with right now. And then, of course, because of the decline in growth rates in China, there has been a widespread decline in commodity prices, which has deeply impacted the steel industry, which is very important in India because coal and iron ore are linked to it. It has impacted the aluminum industry. It has impacted cement. All of these basic industries, commodity-linked industries today, because of the slowdown in China, because of the price collapse that has happened there, have also made it much more difficult for us to continue to grow. Despite all of that, despite those headwinds, that the fact that the CSO is saying that our GDP growth rate is going to be 7.6%
I'll come to the GDP numbers
this year
separately.
is extraordinary.
You mentioned that the deficits are coming down. But let's look at some other economic numbers. The index of industrial production contracted 3.2% in December. The purchasing managers indices are in the negative zone. The consumer price index actually went up by 5.6%, whereas for pulses it's growing by 46%. Now, Onion lost you the election in Delhi in the assembly elections many years ago. The pulses prices made you lose partly the elections in Bihar. Let's look also at corporate investments, which shrank 24% towards the end of last year. So the numbers aren't necessarily
Rahul, you are you're pulling numbers out.
As you would make them seem. You're citing certain numbers. I'm citing certain counter numbers.
The numbers I am citing are not month-to-month numbers. Right? They are not just the few select negative numbers. I am citing the large trends that are underway. I am citing annual numbers, and it's not me who's saying it. It's the IMF, it's the World Bank, it's the rating agencies, and it's the Wall Street and Dalal Street analysts who are saying that the Indian economy is rock solid. It's not just me who's saying that. So we have to recognize what the numbers represent in totality. It's not helpful to just pull a few numbers from here and there. It's not helpful to just provide half the truth.
But exports are going down. Whether it's
the exports, but if you look at our market share,
down 18%.
Yes, but that is because there is a global economic slowdown. If you look at our share, our market share as far as exports are concerned, our market share has remained absolutely steady. The reason why our exports have come down is because oil prices have declined. A large portion of our exports are oil, and when oil goes from 110 to 30, then our oil exports go down dramatically as well, and therefore there is a decline in exports. You strip out oil exports from the export number and you'll find that yes, exports have declined a little bit, but they've declined right in line with the decline in global exports as well, and that demonstrates that our share has remained quite steady, our competitiveness has remained quite steady.
No, you're talking also about the CSO figures for the GDP. But let's look at what the world is making of our current GDP figures. The authenticity of Indian economic numbers are being questioned for the first time. This used to happen in China's case for many years. I want to quote to you what two major banks are saying. The Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, says that while the economy grew at a current price of 5.2%, the growth was 7.4% at constant price. It is inflated by 2.5%, 2.2%. It says deflators have been underestimated in the new GDP series. Now, I want to quote to you what Nevsky's Capital is saying. It says, it talks about India and China. Currently stated the Chinese GDP is 7.1%, India is 7.4%. Both are substantially overstated. This obfuscation and distortion of data makes it difficult to forecast macro and hence micro as well as ever-growing share of our investment universe. You've seen several such
there are obviously lots of people
questioning the data that we are putting out.
Surely, of course, there are lots of people with lots of opinions out there. You have to understand that the Central Statistical Office is a world-class, professionally oriented and a completely independent institution. It is providing these numbers with all of the backup data and all of the evidence, so people are free to go through it and look at it.
No, but everybody now is looking at the numbers by adjusting them to what they believe are the true numbers.
But let me add to that, Rahul, which is that this is completely professionally put together, completely independent, and the numbers are all provided. So it is completely reliable and a high integrity number. In addition to that, if you look at what the World Bank and the IMF are saying, they're saying that the GDP growth rates put out by the CSO and the numbers that we have been suggesting are correct as far as government is concerned are actually quite accurate. And if you look at their estimates, those are very close to the CSO estimates. So what you'll find is that very eminent agencies that have very large research staffs that also look at the economy and come up with GDP growth rates are right in line with the ones that the CSO is putting
we can argue about numbers, but what we can't argue is about sentiment.
No. So that is true. We cannot argue about sentiments. But as far as numbers are concerned, the IMF and the World Bank are the gold standards when it comes to GDP numbers and GDP growth rate numbers around the world.
As somebody who's managed money and worked with very prestigious corporations in the past, you would realize that the most important number is the number that the fund manager believes in, because he's the one who's going to pump in money into the Indian economy, and if he's not prepared to believe the numbers that our government is putting out, then that is a problem. But I want to move on now, because we can argue about numbers, but let's talk about sentiment. I spoke about the stock market at the beginning of our show. If you look at industry by and large, speak to industrialists, off record, they're not confident. They weren't confident towards the end of the Manmohan Singh government. They assumed that things would change when Modi came in. They still haven't started investment big time into the Indian economy. Clearly, you haven't been able to win over their confidence to the extent that they start pumping their hard-earned money back into the Indian economy.
Rahul, that's a sweeping generalization which I reject. The reality is that if you look at many sectors of the economy, whether it's airlines, where both the airlines have been placing massive airplane orders, whether you look at automotive, you look at what's happening in tourism, you look at e-commerce, you look at renewables.
But can I ask you to look at
you look at telecom, you look at
infrastructure.
That's what I'm saying. Let me just complete, please. So what I'm saying is there are many sectors of the economy that are doing very well, thank you. There are other sectors of the economy that are still struggling with the toxic overhang of what the UPA left behind. So power was in a mess with Uday. We are fixing what's happening in power.
Around where we are, there's so much unused real estate. No one's willing to come in and buy.
Of course, so real estate, of course, as you know, goes through its own boom and bust cycle. Capacity is put up in the market, then it has to be absorbed. So we are going through that kind of a cycle as far as real estate is also concerned. It is true that steel, real estate, cement, aluminum, as I was saying earlier, these are commodity-linked industries. These are industries where there were a lot of policy challenges, policy paralysis that happened in the UPA government. And yes, those sectors of the economy are still struggling to get back to a normal situation. But there are other sectors of the economy that are doing extremely well, and all of this is ultimately reflected in the GDP numbers that looks at all sectors of the economy. And overall, of course, the economy is doing very well. Yes, there are certain sectors that are not doing as well. That is absolutely true. We have undertaken very significant policy measures to support those. For example, in steel, we've introduced safeguard duties. We put in place minimum import prices. And you have to understand the problem in steel is global overcapacity of steel production, which is creating real price pressures in India. In power, the DISCOMs under the UPA governments had been run in a way that did not allow them to recoup their full costs. And therefore, they had to be once again sort of set on solid footing, and we have done that. So, in many of these industries, our policies are now fixing the problems of the past and fixing the NPA situations that had happened because of these wrong policies.
Okay, I'll take a few questions from the management students that we have here. Who would like to ask the first question? Can we have a mic here, please?
It's almost 20 months. We have our Prime Minister Narendra Modi being serving the people. But how can we relate that Achhe Din has massively impacted the people of middle income people? Because we can overall see the development globally. But is it justified enough that the sentiments of middle income people or middle level people have justified so far?
My understanding of the situation for middle class people is that prices have remained very stable. The galloping inflation that we had during the UPA time has gone away. There is more job creation in the economy, so jobs are more plentiful, they are absolutely available. And finally, what has happened is that salaries have been increasing at 10 or 12% a year. So the amount you can save, your take-home savings, all of those have in fact improved as far as the middle class is concerned. Certainly, there is far more electricity available now than it was. Remember, in 2012, there was a blackout across all of India. Are you hearing any of that? No, none of that is happening. Roads are being built. Railways have been improved. Jan Dhan Yojana is in place for poor people. Mudra Yojana is in place for people who want to get jobs started. In Startup India, we've made it possible for all of you to start companies without any hassles at all. So as far as Achhe Din is concerned, I think we have delivered on the ground with real benefits for everybody.
Okay, next question. Yes, go ahead. Can someone give her the mic, please?
So you just mentioned about Startup India. A campaign has been launched, Startup India, Stand Up India. So we can see that it is in a dicey position because 293% losses have been, the loss percentage has been incurred by the all the startup companies like Amazon, Flipkart and all. So we can see that though they have high sales volume, but still their losses have been very high. They have increased from last year by 293%. That is remarkable. So how do you suggest this campaign, how it supports them? Like still they are hoping for some government supports?
Well, the way the venture capital business works is that you have to make sure that you have sufficient funding to support you through the time when you're making losses. The important thing is that the people who are backing you, the investors that are backing you, have to be able to look at your business model, look at your position in the market, and recognize that it is worthwhile to invest, get through those losses, and then have a viable business thereafter. So if people are investing in Amazon, they're investing in Flipkart and so on, even as they run operating losses, it's because they believe in steady state that company will actually make money and then they will recoup their investments. The people who are backing companies like that are very smart people. They know exactly how to invest, so we should trust their judgment.
Okay.
They're professionals.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
So there is a slowdown in the investment. So sir, what is in the new budget that will help them, help people to encourage to invest their money? That is what I want to ask. So
yeah, I can obviously not talk about the budget that's coming up. I can tell you though that our policies are there to encourage investment, to encourage job creation. Certainly we are doing that through Make in India, through what we're doing to do the ease of doing business. For Skill India, we are training crores and crores of people there. So all of our policies are intended to support investment and to support job creation.
Okay, last two questions. Yes, go ahead.
Sir, we all know that inflation discourage exports, right, sir? And we can see in July 2015 it was 3.62 approximately, and today it is 5.52, and it is continuously growing, increasing. So it will not stop, it will not come down.
Actually, inflation has come down a lot. If you look at inflation during the last few years of the UPA government, inflation was running at 8, 9 and 10%. In fact, they had 7 years of inflation greater than 8 or 9%, which is unprecedented in Indian economic history. Ever since we have come to power in May 2014, inflation has been declining, and today inflation is about 5.5%, which is well within what RBI has decided is the right band for India, which is 4% plus minus 2%. So that's really where we would like inflation to be in India. We are a fast-growing country, so there will be some inflation, and inflation right now is very much within control and is trending in a very positive direction.
Okay, go ahead.
Sir, in the vision of Make in India, our Prime Minister is focusing on becoming new entrepreneur. Sir, from where they will seek the investment, and also which kind of grants and exemptions they'll provide to the new entrepreneurs?
No, so the venture capital industry in India is very active. Angel investors are very active. If you have a great business idea, a great business model that can scale and be profitable, there are many, many sources of funding that will be available and open to you. As far as the government is concerned, we have provided for the India Aspiration Fund that is going to get 10,000 crores to fund other venture capital funds that will then be able to back startups. So I can assure all of you that if you have genuinely a good business model and a good business idea, it will certainly find funding.
Okay, we'll take one final question. Go ahead.
So as we know, the Sensex had a bloodbath yesterday. So is there any policies that the government is planning for the stability of the market?
You are studying for your MBA, I'm told, and so you understand exactly how markets work and what the role of government is. The role of government is to be able to ensure that the economy works well, that there is a very good enabling environment for entrepreneurs, for businesses, that our tax rates are reasonable, that there's ease of doing business. Thereafter, it's up to all of you. We are just the empire. Khiladi to aap log hain. You are the players on the field. You have to decide whether to invest, not to invest, whether to create companies, not create companies. We are doing our job, and now it's for the people of India and the companies of India.
Government is actually the BCCI that runs cricket, but nowadays that's not necessarily a very good thing to say. So we're going to leave it over there. We wish you all the very best. Let's hope that this is a cracking budget and really does help in bring about Achhe Din, not just for the Mantrijis and people in government, but for people on the outside who feel that, because ultimately they're the voters and they have to feel that Achhe Din have arrived for them. Gents, enough for joining us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
General Dalbir Singh has condoled the passing away of braveheart Lance Naik Hanumantappa, saying that the soldier in him will continue to inspire generations.
Now, Mr. Rijiju, we're looking at a lot of awards wapsi that's happening just now. Started with the writers, went on to academics, historians, scientists.